All right, let's get started with this next chapter entitled Churches. I'd like to start off with St. James, my good friend Joe Bowie's church. I wanted to begin outside of quote-unquote home, so I'll start with the church called St. James. It was a traditional one. I do not remember any shouting or over exuberance expressed. This was Mrs. Bowie's church, where she insisted that Joe and I go from our pre-adolescent phase whenever I'd go visit him on Sunday. Yes, at ages 7 through 12 or so, where these memories are from. The corner store had the best hamburgers in the world. This was on the near west side. I want to say Finney or so. I need to Google it. The point was where we got the best service and the best quote-unquote wine head advice in the area. Yes, that is right. Wine head advice. We received good counseling. They told us not to drink. They told us not to smoke cigarettes. And we did follow the advice until later when we were faced with peer pressure. We ignored our advisors and shot caution to the wind, drinking like a fish one day and smoking like a chimney. I always made a beeline for what I considered a valuable resource. I really thought of them as a valuable resource and still do, remembering what they said in terms of some opinions that I didn't hear on the news. Whenever I joined them and savored their wise words, I always thought that they should be invited to the White House for at least a housekeeper's opinion. Then there was Pilgrim's Rest, Michael Simpson's church. This was Mr. and Mrs. Simpson's home church that I remember being over on Kings Highway. We didn't really go in there too much. I didn't visit at all, I don't think, except for maybe a funeral or two. I do believe that, it was a good church. I heard very good things about it and knew some members that were going there. I wish I had confirmed the value of the spirituality as I did with Joe, how little we got exposed to listening to 2 or 3 minutes of the sermon and then leaving. Last but not least, well, actually before we get to last but not least, let's go to St. Engelbert. This was where one of the parents attended. We did not dare step in there when we heard from our good friend about how much ferocity the nuns expressed at discipline time. I never heard about nice acting nuns to rebuke that opinion until I got to Houston and met those nuns at St. Elizabeth's. But more on that later. Surgery and subsequent events involving a loss of memory in one of the nuns that happened to. Last but not least was First Baptist. It is in the heart still of the ghetto. On Sunday we never had trouble except from the congregation, and that was very much undertoned. I did not learn till later that we were the uppity, considered petty bourgeois church of St. Louis blacks within the St. Louis community. We had a great Sunday school. I can remember performing in Easter plays, being frightened and not knowing my lines because I didn't make rehearsals. I didn't have a ride. Well, let's put it like this. My parents were both working. Only Sundays did we go to church, and that was because getting a ride. I do remember Mrs. Mary Stansel leading the general choir, and what a good job she did. I remember them so well. I remember the missionary choir singing, laying down, and really having a good sound for what looked like was on their faces. We had a corner store also, but it didn't have good hamburgers. We just got candy and cookies and pickles with part of the money we were supposed to be putting in church. We had several good preachers. Somehow the congregation got a reputation and ran them off. This even included the last one where my mother had rejoined the church, both she and my father. And really, to be honest with you, was on the straight and narrow. But she found it very distasteful that her favorite preacher had been dismissed. I wish I could give you names at this time, but let's just suffice it to say that this is probably pretty common around the country, except for certain places where, and I discussed this with a guy today, the preacher takes totalitarian control over the deacon board, totalitarian control of who gets appointed, and therefore cannot be unappointed. That'll do it right now for churches in St. Louis.